Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my first ever reaction video. I'm going to be reacting to my Drive to Survive Season 4 predictions, which I made all the way back in August of last year, way before the season was over. I guess I was just excited. So we're going to have a chat through, see how many of them I got right and how many of them I got wrong. And if you haven't seen the original video yet, I will link it up here for you to check it out. Before we get into the actual reactions though, make sure you're subscribed to my channel so that you don't miss a single video when I release them every week. I made 4 predictions in total in my original video, and one of the main ones that I thought that Drive to Survive was going to focus on more heavily is the crash between Max and Lewis at Silverstone last season. And while they did include it, they didn't really focus as heavily on it as I thought they would. At the time it was a huge deal, but in the series itself they sort of looked at it as part of the wider ongoing battle that happened, and you know, who was stepping over the line at which point. Obviously, because Max didn't actually directly take part in this season of Drive to Survive either, it was more so Christian Horner speaking on behalf of Max / Red Bull, and then Lewis obviously speaking on behalf of himself and how he felt about each of the situations. So I'm gonna give myself like a half point for that, because yes, they included it, but was it that big a deal? No. I think Max's lack of involvement, similar to how, you know, Mercedes' lack of involvement earlier on in Drive to Survive's kind of lifespan, had a big impact. Again, that has happened here, and specifically because Red Bull were the second title contender aside from Mercedes last season, and it's pretty hard to have that two-way conversation when you've only got the team principal. No offense to Christian Horner, but it kind of became the Christian Horner show in this season of Drive to Survive, and it was at times a bit Made in Chelsea vibes, you know, like panning over the farm and they're riding horses, and it kind of just, I think the direct involvement or lack thereof from Max definitely had a big impact on how the season was able to be portrayed and how much they were able to actually read into what happened, I think. So a second topic that I predicted would come up quite heavily in Drive to Survive Season 4 is the Daniel Ricciardo versus Lando Norris dynamic. As we all know, it took Daniel essentially the first half of the season to get to any kind of grips with that McLaren last year, and he's a really popular figure in the sport, he's a really popular figure in the TV show. There was no way that that was not going to come up, so I'm giving myself full points for that one. Although there was a bit of a curveball thrown by Netflix, I felt, which was essentially how they portrayed the dynamic between Lando and Daniel aside from just the car performance. I think they made it seem as though there was like pretty significant bickering and beef going on behind the scenes, when to me that's just two really competitive teammates, you know, one person having been embedded in the team for a number of years, another driver coming in. That's just a competitive dynamic of two drivers to me, and I think Netflix really hammed it up, unfortunately, and you know, maybe it was that dramatic, but it just didn't feel like it at the time, and I don't know whether that was really a true portrayal of what happened. And in comparison, they made Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc look as if they were best buddies, which they do get along really well, certainly, but as we all know, there was quite a bit of bickering, especially on track, between those two drivers last season, and that really wasn't addressed at all. So, you know, the sort of the way that Netflix decided to put a positive slant on the Ferrari pairing and a very negative slant on the McLaren pairing did grate me a little bit, and it just sort of plays into one of the general, you know, criticisms of Drive to Survive, that they kind of manufacture these dramatic scenarios essentially the same as, like I said earlier, like a Made in Chelsea or, you know, any of those reality TV shows. And I think unfortunately this season it was kind of more glaring than ever, and it is definitely starting to grate a lot more on people. Okay, so now let's get into the ones that I completely bombed. So first of all, I really thought that there was going to be some mention of race cancellations due to COVID in Season 4. Look, I get it. We've all, you know, we're sick and tired of hearing about COVID. It's been 2 plus years. We don't want to hear about it anymore, certainly not when we're unwinding watching Drive to Survive. But with that being said, it was the second year that it really wasn't mentioned significantly at all. And it had such a huge part to play again in the schedule, the logistics, the championship. You know, the number of races in a season isn't just something to be ignored. And when you cancel races or have to, you know, double up on the same track more than one weekend in a row, I think that is worth mentioning, at least personally to me. Maybe other folks might not find it as interesting or important to call it out, but that was definitely a prediction that I got wrong, and I guess they just weren't ever planning to mention COVID at all. Fair enough, I guess. So I said that my fourth prediction was probably an outlier when I first made it, and I was right because it did not get included in this season. And to be fair, I don't know if it would ever be addressed in a TV show like Drive to Survive. And that prediction was that Monaco is becoming too boring. And this argument has kind of been circling for a number of years, but last year in particular, there was a lot of chatter after the race and even during the race weekend that there was really just nothing happening. The cars were just following each other around in a procession. People were really starting to question what value Monaco was adding to the calendar aside from the glitz and glamour, and whether the value of winning Monaco is still as heavily coveted as it has been throughout the history of Formula One. Personally, I'm not sure that it is. I'm not saying that I would get rid of it necessarily. I am extremely curious and quite excited to see what happens there this year, given all the regulation changes. The track isn't really wide enough for the teams to be like battling with these wider cars, so I actually don't know how they're planning to get around that without half of the field crashing out. So I think there is a lot to be said for wait and see this year. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Monaco plays out. Unfortunately, overall, I really wasn't that big a fan of season 4 of Drive to Survive. I think they're losing a lot of folks with the way that they're running the show. At the same time, the biggest goal of that series is essentially to increase F1's footprint in the US. Lo and behold, 4 seasons later, we're about to have 3 Grand Prix in the US in 2023. So it's achieving its goals, but I also think there is certainly some damage that's being done, and there's also a bizarre class divide happening within F1 fans, particularly on social media, of, you know, were you here before Drive to Survive or were you here after? And I find that really toxic and just unhelpful. So, you know, that's not to say I expect anyone that has anything to do with Drive to Survive to change their approach, but with that being said, they have not yet been renewed for a season 5, so maybe there's a hint there, or perhaps they will be and they're just delaying the announcement. But let me know in the comments. As always, I love to hang out with you all, hear your opinions. What did you think of season 4 of Drive to Survive? Did it meet your expectations? Did it not? Were you in favour of the Made in Chelsea Christian Horner show drama between the team principals versus talking about a lot of the drivers? Tell me, what were your thoughts?